Yeah.
800, well, 300 years.
Oh my God, 400 years.
Mm.
Longer than Edo era. I
Right,
didn't know that.
Not much change in that period. I mean, it was not a very affluent period. It was a.
I didn't know that. I didn't study Japan history. 400 years. At that time, is women lead the society?
No, basically, what I understand is that actually women were women in the highest classes were highly educated. They were literate. They engaged in poetry and arts, but they did not engage in other things like politics and warfare and things like that. Those were activities that were left by men, but because women fulfilled the cultural role and they were writing, we can have a better idea of what occupied the minds and what were the ideas and what was the culture of that day. Well, at least within the group of
only culture. How about household?
Mostly culture, poetry, culture. They were writing, they were playing games, they were
how about
engaging.
Family?
Yeah, well.
Family.
Yes. Sorry, this bird is so storybotchi.
Put her into cage.
Yeah. Muri. Actually, I need to damasarenai to.
Okay.
Anyway, it will soon get fed up.
How the family in Heian? Takashi, did you study the Heian era? I didn't study Japanese history before. Do you know something? I didn't know Murasaki Shikibu before, but I don't almost nothing about Heian era. Almost 400 years. Longer than Edo era. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just remember I had the name in the class. But,
so you didn't study well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Edo, tell me something about just opinion about this video.
Well, what is interesting to me is basically how did this shape Japan as we know today, and what can we trace back to the Heian era that is still alive today. I think the sense of melancholy that was described, the temporariness of life, those are things that you can still see in Japanese culture today. I think they play an important role. The importance of cultures, sensitivity. I think those elements, they are still very, very important in Japan today. So that's something that dates back 1,000 years, but that we can still see that in Japanese culture. Now, what was described here and what we know from the Heian era is that it's actually through the lens of women in very privileged positions.
What kind of culture do you think a similarity we have?
Well, what I understand is that actually what the Japanese elite was trying to emulate was the Chinese culture.
Yeah. At that time, after Tang Dynasty.
Yes, that was basically the culture that we're trying to emulate. But from the viewpoint of the Chinese, that made them look upon Japan as being a little bit backwards, because it was actually 200 years after that dynasty had already had passed. So in the eyes of the Chinese, they may not be superior, but when you look at the perspective of what was happening in Europe, I think it was very advanced compared to cultures in Europe. This was the era when we were in the Dark Ages.
Yeah. Not organized in Europe at that time. Yes.
Right. So this is an interesting period. Now, women were influential, but of course they were also. This was still very much a patriarchal society. However, the influence that they had through arts and they could still actually exercise their influence, albeit a little bit more indirect.
What do you mean?
Well, basically, men still ruled society, and so women they were not expected to have direct influence, but indirectly through their writings, through their influence, through their interaction with men, and through people-to-people relationships, they played a rather important role. And compared to, for example, Europe, they were better protected. For example, I understand that women, that men could not be physically violent towards women.
At that time, I think in this video, Buddhism is very much influenced, but not Confucianism, right? Only Buddhism. My concern is they have influenced by Chinese, Confucianism, and family is very important factors to organize society. Sun Tzu the same. I view the Sun Tzu history, what kind of lifestyle they have been in 2,500 years ago. And Tang Dynasty also, they are very much concerned about their family first, then following their government and everything else. So woman is the center of family, so man need to well organize with his wife. Otherwise he cannot manage their organization. So men is very much study from communication with their family. So my concern is what kind of lifestyle in Heian era. I actually, sorry, I don't know nothing about Heian era, what they have been, kind of lifestyle.
Well, what John Green is saying, and I think it's very, very justified, is that what we know, the traces that we can find back, there are a lot of traces from women, but these are all women in very privileged circumstances. It doesn't mean that the circumstances were the same outside of the palaces in Japan, and that agricultural society was exactly the same. Whether arts had an important role beyond the ranks of the aristocracy, I really we can really not be sure.
He said just 1% of society just occupied high-ranking people, right? So I don't know what ordinary people they are doing at that time.
Well, survival, because actually the economy was not very well developed.
Right.
Men were not really interested in the economy.
Right.
They were not really interested in what was happening outside of the palace, so they didn't really try very hard to create better circumstances for Japan. They were mainly concerned about their own private lives, contemplative, maybe what you say, like following a Buddhist lifestyle, not actually aiming to develop the country around them.
At that time, okay, I know very well about Edo era, and everybody, Edo Baku promote egalitarian, so everybody equal. I think not only the getting to the Edo era, but before Edo era, all the way around, Japanese people try to egalitarian. So at even Heian era, only 1% of very high-ranking people, but the ordinary people is also equal, even though they are poor.
That's not what John Green is saying in his video.
Yeah, they don't say that, but my guess.
He's saying that it's actually extremely hierarchical, and there are a lot of differences. So if he's right, then I wonder what triggered Japanese society to become more egalitarian.
I think the top-end people and also the ordinary people in Japan is very similar to Korea or Chosen and China. Right? Like just before Heian era is the Tang dynasty, then the following the dynasty is they try to copy from China to import into Japan. So it means many kind of business is prevailing at that time in Japan. Like after Heian and then Kamakura and Edo, right? So they are very. I believe they are just already established a society or community in those era, and just he said especially focus on the high-ranking people, especially for women, right?
Right. 1 second. I need to answer the door. 1 second.